Hi and welcome to the Running Shoe Geek channel. Today we're talking about this shoe right over here, the Under Armour HOVR Machina 3. And today we're going to run you through all that is new about the shoe, as well as how it compares with the previous version. I take testing so seriously, I wear the new and my old model side by side on my run. Let's hope I don't get lopsided. Alright, so we'll chat about who the shoe is for and what I think about it in a sec, but let's first run through some key updates about the model. The big update this season lies at the shoe's midsole. Under Armour have increased the stack height of the shoe by approximately 2mm, but have kept the drop the same at 8mm. They've also introduced a dual density HOVR midsole foam. So this netted-like structure at the back here is Under Armour's softer HOVR foam, while the white foam at the front is, of course, the firmer, more responsive foam, as opposed to last season, which kept the same foam throughout the entire length of the shoe. The net effect of this is that the shoe does become firmer underfoot. And what is interesting is that despite the prominent heel design of the shoe, I am thrown more into the midfoot of the shoe, which might also affect the firmer feeling I am getting underfoot. Under Armour have removed the P-backs plate that was found on the previous model that gave the shoe a rigid but a responsive feeling. So there's no plate in this shoe, but it is more flexible than before. However, it's still fairly rigid compared with other well-cushioned trainers on the market, but it does give the shoe that snappy underfoot feeling. There's still a Bluetooth chip found inside the shoe that reads cadence and other running metrics. This is something we'll come back to in a sec. At the outsole, the Machina 3 gains rubber coverage from the previous model, and it's got to have one of the best rubber coverages in the market at the moment. And this is interesting, especially as most of the brands and models move away from complete rubber coverages, but it certainly does give the shoe durability points. But it may have to do something with the shoe gaining 10 grams of weight, and it now weighs in at 300 grams or 10.6 ounces in a men's sample size. At the upper we have a new mesh, which also gains material and becomes more dense. So certainly durable, but perhaps not the most airy for those scorching summers. But the design of the mesh is pretty awesome. The lacing system has also changed quite a lot since version 2. I got along really well with version 2, but version 3 I like a lot as well. So many roads lead to Rome. What I especially like about it is that you don't have to be fickle about getting the right lace tension in order to get a good lockdown. It's pretty inherent. And it uses these fly wire-like sort of eyelets that close in nicely, and I think Under Armour really have a great record of building good uppers. We've also got a new heel counter on the model, and this one is flared to take pressure off of the Achilles. And this is growing in popularity in running footwear at the moment. More and more models are using this design. We've also got a new heel clip, one that wraps further around the foot to give you a pretty stable feel without being overly constructed. So we've spoken about what's new about the model. Now let's chat about what the model's all about. Now we know that Under Armour aren't a running-centric brand. They are more a training-centric brand that are especially strong in apparel. And they are still an emerging running brand that are trying to break into the traditional running market and capture that conservative consumer that doesn't really deviate much from what's worked in the past. The one confusing thing about Under Armour's footwear range is that it's slightly intertwined with their training range. But in that is a smaller core running selection that is as good as anything else in the market, including sort of a fantastic product what we have right here. Despite Under Armour's online store saying that this is a part distance shoe, part speed shoe, this is really just their equivalent of the Nimbus or 1080. It's their premium, well-cushioned, high-mileage trainer. And I think what they're trying to say is that for someone who typically would race in a well-cushioned trainer, it's a bit more snappy than some of its like-for-likes and a bit more applicable come race day or parkrun or 10K for someone who typically would wear a shoe like this. And I'm inclined to agree with that. It is more snappy and more responsive for a shoe of its category, but it's by no means a race shoe. As a runner who's light and fast on my feet, I tend to prefer firmer shoes like your Rides, your older Ghosts and your Bostons. So I get along very well with the Machina 3 and find it's very practical for a runner who's looking for a well-cushioned shoe that's still snappy or not slow on foot. But I do understand why many runners will want a well-cushioned shoe that's sort of soft, squishy and flexible on foot. So there is this element of preference when picking between two shoes like this of the same category but present different underfoot features. I classify the Machina 3 as a stable neutral shoe, meaning that it doesn't offer extra arch support like a stability shoe would, or medial posting, or anything to prevent you from overpronating, but it does have characteristics that does make it a stable shoe, such as its sturdy heel counter, its high quality cushioning, and its lack of flexibility that sort of guides you in the right direction without forcing or without trying to correct your stride. And most runners are actually playing into the stable neutral category, so it's applicable for sort of many types of runners, but especially your sort of either your older runners or your beginner runners, or runners who are looking for something that sort of feels balanced on foot and sturdy on foot. Something that plays into almost all runners' preference is having a durable shoe. Now, the build quality on this is solid. It's got a nice rubber coverage. There's no point of weakness in the shoe. It's got a dense upper. It's got no sort of point of weakness at areas, key wear areas, which is above the toe or sort of on the edges of the foot. So the build quality on this is solid. And while I'm only on my fourth run in the shoe, I think based on the track record of the previous models and the build quality we see here, is that I'm almost certain that these are going to hold up very nicely, and that if you're looking for one of those bulletproof trainers, this is a great bet. In terms of the shoe's weight, while it's not the lightest in the market, it's in line with its competitors. And I almost don't mind that it's not super light, because it does make up in responsiveness. And for the type of running I'm doing, the easier daily training or slightly up-tempo running, I don't really notice the shoe's weight. As I mentioned earlier, the Machina 3 still has that Bluetooth technology that the previous version used, and other versions or other shoes within the Under Armour use. Now, what it does is it gives you cadence data and running metrics such as landing patterns during your run, and it communicates with the Map My Run app about this data, or even connects to some GPS watches. Now, Under Armour aren't the first brand to put a chip inside a shoe. Adi did it in football boots, as during football matches you aren't allowed to wear watches, and it essentially doubled up as an activity tracker during football. Nike also did it with a sort of not so high-tech chip that allowed, and also prior to sort of mass commercialization of GPS watches, that allowed you to double up and track your data with your shoe. It's a bit different here, as the runner who can afford the shoe can usually afford a GPS watch as well, but maybe isn't quite ready to take that step if you are a beginner runner to purchase the GPS watch. So it doubles up nicely as a shoe that gives you insight into your run, and maybe is that intermittent step before you invest in that GPS watch. But what it does do is it also gives you landing patterns or landing data that you don't get from a GPS watch. And it's surprisingly accurate. It's maybe not as high-tech as one would think, but it does give you accurate data and isn't gimmicky. I go into more details in terms of how this works on my previous review video of the Machina 2, so check that out if you are interested, but it certainly is a cool selling point about the shoe. I think we've gone through most pros and cons about the shoe, but just to focus on the pros, if you're looking for a well-cushioned trainer that's quality, good-looking, durable and pretty stable on foot, then definitely have this on your radar. And with that, this concludes this review video. Thanks very much for tuning in, and we'll see you shortly for a new video. Until then, cheers.